Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.
Hello, I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. Today, we are honored to have Barry Lopez with us. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
It's been many years since you were last here, but you're an author, an essayist, fiction writer, photographer. You've created 14 works of fiction and nonfiction. And you got the National Book Award for nonfiction for your book, Arctic Dreams. Tell us a little about that one.
Oh, goodness. A long time ago, I was in the high Arctic and studying wolves and finished a book about wolves and came back down to my home in Oregon and thought, wait a minute, I think I missed something. And I went back up to Alaska and opened my eyes to something more than wolves, and that's where Arctic Dreams came from. So I traveled up there for about 3 years. I think I made 18 trips or something like that, and then wrote that book.
And here's my old beloved cover of the book, but it is a spectacular read. Thank you.
Thank you.
You were a National Book Award finalist for the other book you were talking about, Of Wolves and Men.
Yes.
And you were a Guggenheim Fellow, the Lannan Literary Award for the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the John Burroughs Medal, Oregon Governor's Award, Oregon Book Award.
The question after all that is, well, can he write?
Yes,
actually. I feel I'm very grateful for all the attention that's come to my work, but telling the story and having people whose lives maybe have closed down a little bit open up when they read a story, that's what's really important to me.
Well, you're very successful with that. There's a couple of threads that I wanted to talk about.
Yes.
One is place and one is storytelling. But
right.
You've traveled over 80 countries.
I have worked through about 80 countries. People like to keep lists and say that when the plane hits the ground, they've been in that country, even if it takes off in the same motion. But I don't count countries unless I've stayed overnight at least. And the reason for going to all of those places is you just can't get it right by staying forever in your own home place. You have to go out and see what the rest of the world faces and how different the rest of the world is.
And you are a fellow of the Explorers Club.
I am.
And you use your experiences. It adds such a richness to your writing, whether it's the fragrances in a high rainforest or whether it's, the scent of creosote in the desert breeze. It's so, you've clearly been there and you can clearly communicate it to us. When you said about being in your own place, one of my favorite books, and this is the one we did an interview with about long ago, it's called Home Ground, Language for an American Landscape. I really think this is a reference book, a classic, a delight, that everyone who loves the land should know about this book. Tell us what you did in it.
Well, let's see. My wife and I, who's the other editor there on the cover of the book, are fascinated by these terms like arroyo, for example, or looking glass prairie, which is used to describe a prairie where the grass is high enough to block the wind and the flooded grass is so still you can look down off a horse and see yourself. So it's called a looking glass prairie. So we made a list of about 900 of these terms, and I talked to a number of friends and asked them to write for us, and we gave each of them 20 terms and told them they couldn't trade with each other. They had to define those terms and that they would have to pass the approval of a board of geographers. And then we told the geographers, these are writers, not geographers. So if they got nothing wrong, it's fine with us, but you can't tell them they have to do it a different way. So there were 45 of us, and we made that book together.
I want to show a close-up of just one of the drawings. So there are these beautiful pen and ink drawings. This is of a meander. one of, a term that I adore.
Yes.
And you have it faced on the other side by a quote from Michael Ondaatje, who wrote
Yes.
talking about meanders.
Well, one thing that
Or using
one
the word
point
meander.
I wanted to make with a quote from Michael, for example, was that place and the terms of place are important to almost all writers, and so Deborah and I, in our reading, looked for those evocative sentences that might use a word like meander, and then we put them in the what am I looking for? The indicia, the just a little material in the margins. Marginalia is the word I wanted.
Yeah, but that's the richness of this. You've got all the definitions. You've got the terms being used in literature. You've got the wonderful drawings, and some of these are very specific to one area, like kiss
tank.
Kiss tank.
The Texas term for water that's in a little pocket. And in order to drink it, you've got to get down on your knees and put your lips to the water. So it's called a kiss tank, where a regular tank would be underneath a windmill for cattle or something would be called a tank, but you don't have to kiss that water.
So in Homeground and in Arctic Dreams, you explore the relationship between human culture and the physical landscape.
Yes.
And that is a gift to us so much. You call forth the spirit, is the word erencia? Carencia, which is, explain what?
Well, it's actually it's got an ugly origin with bullfighting, and it's when a bull realizes that its time is up and it makes its stand. That place in the bull ring is called carencia, and it's the place where you go to say, I understand my time is over, and I will do it here where I truly belong.
And so we all, in that way, have that home ground that we know.
Well, we all, we're in a time now when we're all looking for the place to take our stand, because what we see coming is terrifying. And I think it's part of the social responsibility of writers to say, how can I help? And, if you say to me, this book helped, that's a big thing for me to say, I read this book and I came back to life, or whatever it happens to be. But the book is not about me, and we don't need another writer, but we do need those books. So over time you realize you'll be old and die and drift away, and then somebody else will come along as a storyteller, and they'll carry the same effort forward to be a companion to the reader. I am much more attracted to being a reader's companion, a fellow traveler, to express affection and wonder about the world for that person and with that person, than in being somebody's authority.
So that's what, to segue from the power of place and the importance of place, the importance of storytelling. And you say at one point that sometimes a person is dying for a story, even more than food.
Yeah, sometimes a person needs a story more than they need food.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you have given us quite a story.
With Resistance.
This is the book. It came out in 2004.
It did, yes.
And it's called Resistance. I must say, this is stunningly beautiful. It's really quite an amazing piece, and I really want to spend a little time talk about what caused you to write it, when, and how did you possibly come up with the structure that you did? These are individual stories tied together in an impeccable way, an inevitable way, but they're stories of such complexity and richness, and all leading to a gift of a different way of looking at things. Talk to me.
A longtime friend of mine is a man named Alan McGee. He's a painter, and he did the work that accompanies those stories. And I was in his studio in Maine, and I saw these monotypes, and I was so disturbed by them and moved by them. I said, would you just make me some Xeroxes and send them to me? And I just want to be around them. So I put them up.
I'm just going to show one of them. It's a very, very, very powerful image.
I put them up in my studio, and I didn't know what I was going to do. But that request that I made of Alan is probably what triggered this book, and that is that, I have many of my friends are composers or dancers or photographers or painters. I work with language and they work with other material, but we all talk to each other all the time. What is our responsibility? What are we doing? Where should we push deeper? Each person has their own individual artistic vision, I guess you would say, but we're like a bunch of birds who are looking to each other for the way to travel. So Alan made those monoprints after the invasion, the first Bush invasion, the Gulf War, and they were his criticism and his denial of what that war represented. And after Bush was elected, I tried to look at the way in which we are tyrannized by fearmongers and we make terrible errors like the invasion of Iraq. And as I thought about these things in very loose ways, it occurred to me that the women and men that I'm in touch with all left university at about the same time. Everybody went their own direction. We stay loosely in touch, and something catastrophic might bring us together, and in that moment we would define ourselves as moral entities in the world. So the 9 stories that are here are written by people who went to school together, were young together, were energetic, and had lots of hope for the future together, went off and did what they do, and then in this book, they all get the same letter from the government, which is an indictment, and saying, as artists, you really are upsetting people, and the government needs to talk to you. So these stories are the defiant response to being questioned by a government about your art. And to use your insight into it, these are all people saying, I will not do that. I will find some other way. And I wanted the book to be a source of not just hope, but a source of another path, a different way to meet the beast than the ones that we've chosen, because that beast will devour us. And if we can't see ways to resist that are effective and that take care of us and take care of our children, we're lost.
And so it's clear in the book that this is resistance to conformity, to consumerism, but to any threat for the imagination.
Yeah.
And you urge us all to live lives of resistance. I don't think when you wrote this, you thought we would meet in...
More so now than ever.
More so now than ever. That's what I was so astonished when I read this. So you urge us to live lives of resistance, and you offer templates in some of these stories that something bad happens. Let's maybe talk about one or two of them. Maybe the first one, Rio de la Plata, the Argentine one.
Yes.
So the tragedy has happened. The father leaves the family.
Yeah.
The mother gets sick. The daughter is trying to make sense of all this. Now, there's a hackneyed, predictable, trite way that she could have done it, but she didn't do it that way.
Right. This is a young woman living in Buenos Aires, and it was my intent in the book to place the stories outside, for the most part, outside this country, so that people could say, this is what happens to all of us, no matter where we're living. And that, I don't want to sort of give the story away, as they say, but
it's too good.
The woman discovers her own measure of courage and resistance, and I think the characters to me are extremely real. I guess I would say I fell in love with this woman who crossed the Taklamakan Desert. I wanted to meet her and
is that
and
Elizabeth
talk
on
to
the
her.
camel?
Yeah, Elizabeth.
Oh my gosh!
I wanted to be with her because I knew I would learn from her. So the part of the curious thing about writing is you get credit for being smarter than you really are, and in all of these stories, these people knew each other, and in some sense they were picking up the same signal in the air, and somebody turned it into a song. Somebody turned it into a dance. Somebody's turned it into a photograph. And so I was paying attention to something in the air, and that was the driving force behind the stories. But the characters have they're completely, not completely, but they're largely independent of me, intellectually and emotionally. I wish I could be as good as some of the characters that I create. And Elizabeth was my sweetheart for a while I was working on that book.
So the themes that come up in all these stories are creativity versus fascism, and vigilance. Always be vigilant, but the power of love and community, and so
community. Years ago, I was at a festival, an English language festival in Adelaide in Australia, and they did a wonderful thing. They brought writers in from various countries, and they put us all by ourselves for about 3 days so we could get to know each other. And we were all having breakfast one morning, and somebody said, we're all different ages, we're from different countries and different cultures, we're different genders, we grew up in different environments, rich or poor or whatever. Is there anything that we're writing about that we have in common? And immediately everybody said the same thing: community. What causes it to come together? What tears it apart? And that's, I think, one of the part of what happens in the situation that we're facing now after this election is you're looking to the left and looking to the right and looking at the people you want to be with. I think one of the greatest things that ever happened in this country and in the world was the women's expression of common, basic, can't do without values, all of it expressed in a light and a humorous and loving way instead of in a, with guns or something. And I think in that moment, everybody learned these things are more important than whoever is president, and these things that women are talking about are our resistance, our saying no to fascism and autocratic rule.
We're speaking today with Barry Lopez, particularly about his book, Resistance. And one of the things you mention in this is we want to disrupt through witness, through remembrance, and through courtship of the imagination. And this is, again, where your stories and the power of stories come in, because the memory, we have to keep the memory of those alive. Gore Vidal called us the United States of Amnesia. People really prefer to forget.
Right.
And these stories cause echoes of what we used to know, kind of resonate in us.
Eduardo Galeano, Uruguayan writer, wrote once in a book, in an essay called In Defense of Words, he wrote, "The writer is the servant of memory." And I got to know Eduardo and I said, did you mean that the writer is the servant of her own memory or the servant of her people's memory? And he said, well, of course, it's both. And you can see what it is that he meant. I think so much of what you do today as a writer is to strip away all of the vacillation and misdirection that you're given by governments and say, this happened to us, this is what is wrong. And instead of, I think what a reader wants is for you to be straightforward and honest with them and give them a kind of comfort they can believe in. You can't just say, oh, it'll all turn out all right, because everybody knows it's not going to turn out all right. But can you comfort me even though I think what I'm facing is the end of the world? Can you offer that kind of comfort? That's what you try to do, I think, as a writer.
You stress the importance of creativity in writing, and I'd like to just mention what has brought you to Albuquerque and to Santa Fe. You're giving the first annual Leopold Lecture, named for Aldo Leopold.
Right.
And you're going to present, this makes me so happy, you're going to present the awards in the Aldo Leopold Writing Contest, which engages the next generation of writers in giving them the power to converse about the urgent matters that we're facing, be it climate disruption, no water, diversity, biodiversity being lost. And these are kids between 6th grade and 12th grade in any kind of school, homeschool, private school. And they have
From all over New Mexico.
all over New Mexico, and they've submitted these things. They've been judged without any name, without any background on it, and you get to give these young
Yes.
people what a transmission
Well, that's
of the
maybe
baton.
the major
Talk to me.
reason that I came when they said, "Would you come and do this and deliver the first Aldo Leopold lecture?" And they explained that it would be part of the award presentation to these young writers. I said, sometimes somebody asks you to do something and you don't want to know the person who would say no. Because if you have to see this continuum where we take care of each other through the generations. And if something has been given to me as a writer, somebody knows your name or something like that, and you can stand there and reinforce a young person's belief that they have within themselves the capacity to create stories, what more do you want? So you're validating the attempt that they are making to live in a way they dream they could. You don't want to control them. You don't want to tell them they have to write about global climate change or anything. We don't care what you write about. But if you love language and you love your community and you want to understand how to tell a story that heals a heart, opens a mind, I'd be there in an instant. Wouldn't anybody?
I hope so. I do hope so. But in this, with these young writers and then with your readers, you invite us to step into our own resistance. And so I'd love you to talk about that, particularly in today's political climate under the Trump administration. Yes. There's a lot of challenges. You describe the difference between hope and optimism.
Yes.
So you are hopeful.
And not optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
But hope is a very difficult trail because it takes with it discouragement and despair. And one of the reasons I speak in defense of communities is that if you fall down and you are filled with despair and you say, this is it, this is the last straw for me, I have to be there and say, you know what, Lorene, here's my hand, let's get up and go after it again. And we do that because we share a generation and we share interests. And that continuum, that is what gives hope its validity. If I just say, we could be hopeful because it'll all work out, everybody knows that's nonsense. But if we can convince each other that steady on in a hopeful frame of mind will make the best out of let's say, the worst possible mess that's coming for us, with governments that pay no attention to global climate disturbance, and with autocrats thinking that the best way to take care of people is to build a wall. How insane is that? So we have to be opposed to it, we have to resist it, and we have to help each other understand the nature of our resistance and what each person can do. You cannot go and tell a single mother with 4 children that that's not enough, she has to recycle or something. She can't do that. And it's wrong. It's ethically wrong to tell her she's doing the best she can with 4 children. Thank God for the 4 children that are going to survive with a mother who loves them. You can't ask everybody to do the same thing. And we just look up and down the line at each other and say, whatever you're going to do, I support it. Whatever you're going to do, I support it. And that's how you build community resistance, not by everybody signing the same piece of paper.
Yes, I always love, we've had Tim DeChristopher on a couple of times, and he said about collectivism, that if you want, clicking on a petition is not activism. You actually have to get out of your chair and do something.
Right.
And there's a lot to do, but I love the fact that as a community, there's always fresh horses. There'll be somebody who has had to fall back and rest a little bit, and then is once more into the fray.
Right. That's right. And you got to cover for them while they just take a little bit of a time out.
So storytelling, again, there's film, there's stories, there's photographs, and you were a great landscape photographer. All this all feeds that part of us that does fall back and need to nourish itself before it can fight again.
Right.
How can people, besides seeking out like-minded people, what else can people do to replenish their spirits? I know we're very resilient, but sometimes it's you get up, turn on the news, and the world's on fire. You go,
Well, part of the world is on fire.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, and it may be narrow-minded of me to say this, but I listen to music, I read, I don't photograph anymore, but I photograph when I'm walking in the woods. I frame things, and I find the most neglected antidote to despair in the United States is ignorance of the arts. That artists marginalized with the scientific revolution, and people were taught to believe that science tells the only truth, and the kind of truth that the arts teach was treated as a kind of something that had been replaced by scientific truth. And that's not the case. I mean, anybody who's listened to the fourth movement of the Beethoven Ninth or the Bach cello suites knows that they come alive there. And that material is there for everybody. And it's a source of the development of extremely important things in your interior. One is the sense of self-worth, and the other is the sense of possibility. And I know when I listen to certain pieces of music, if I am depressed or in despair, I listen to a piece of music, maybe an hour-long piece like John Luther Adams' Become Ocean, which won the Pulitzer 2 years ago, and I think, I'm okay now, and I'm back in the saddle, if you will.
Yeah.
I feel a sense of possibility where I only felt a sense of despair, and I feel a sense of self-worth that what I'm doing counts, and what I mean by my life counts, and then I'm back. I think the arts are just, we fail to understand how they've taken care of us for a lot longer than science.
Well, thank you. We've come to the end of our interview. One other source of strength and sustenance for people is to go to the land and to their favorite spots. This book, Home Ground, about the vocabulary, the language of American landscape, is wonderful. And I hope everyone has their place where they can go.
I do too.
To be restored by nature. And this book, Resistance, Barry, I cannot recommend this highly enough. It's really transformative, and I think it's really what we need right now in our world.
Thank you very much.
Our guest today is Barry Lopez. It's been a real pleasure having you here.
It has been for me too. I'm very glad we've had a chance to talk.
Me too. And I'm Lorene Mills. I'd like to thank you, our audience, for being with us today on Report from Santa Fe. We'll see you next week.
Past archival programs of Report from Santa Fe are available at the website reportfromsantafe.com. If you have questions or comments, please email info@reportfromsantafe.com. Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.